There was a time when the Bugatti name sounded like a ghost in a great hall. Admired pictures on the wall, trophies behind glass, and no engine to bring the echoes back to life. Picture a dusty sales room, leather cracked, dealers shrugging. Outside, the market laughed quietly, ready to pounce the moment the first prototype showed a crack. Inside a small, stubborn office, one man sat with a pile of blueprints, a near-empty bank account, and a reputation he could not afford to lose. He looked at the sketches the way a surgeon studies an X-ray, patient, clinical, but aware that one wrong incision could kill everything. "Do it all?" an investor said over coffee, voice flat with the casual cruelty of someone who keeps score in spreadsheets. "Or walk away." The man didn't answer with bravado. He asked one question: "Where do I start?" That question was the fulcrum. It separated wishful nostalgia from the kind of discipline that turns heritage into horsepower. The first weeks were theater. Mechanics in torn shirts hand-fitting parts like priests assembling relics. Engineers arguing until dawn about tolerances that cost fortunes. Money burned with the steady, cruel patience of a furnace. Test benches hummed, then died. Critics scribbled column after column, a relic chasing ghosts. Every headline was a clock counting down. In the dark garage under a single hanging bulb, he spoke softly to a young engineer. "If we fail, this will be the last name we bring to life." The engineer swallowed. The silence that followed was not defeat. It was the kind of resolve that settles in the chest. That resolve demanded two things: a ruthless prioritization of problems, and a tolerance for being misunderstood. He mapped the abyss, the places where most projects collapse. Ego, impatience, and poor controls, and then he built rails across it. Staged milestones, ruthless cost controls, engineering gates that no charisma could leap. This is not glamour. It is method. It is fear measured, options hedged, and the stubborn refusal to let legacy be a museum piece. If you've ever felt paralyzed before an all-or-nothing decision, fear of failure, lack of support, or no plan, which one holds you back? Tap like if this resonates, leave a comment with your biggest pain, and stay with me. Next we go inside the workshop to see the exact mindset and step-by-step choices that turned near ruin into a throne reclaimed. The workshop smelled of oil and burnt coffee. Under the harsh lamps, craftsmen hunched over metal like priests at an altar. He moved through that light with a calm that belied the scoreboard in his head. Time running, money leaking, a name that could not afford another humiliation. Critics had already written the obituary. Column inches described Bugatti as an elegant relic, a museum piece waiting for an ill-fated renaissance. Inside, the team lived the opposite story, one wrench turn at a time, arguing about tolerances, traction maps, and whether the alloy could survive a full-gas run down the dyno. There were nights when the engine refused to cooperate and mornings when the boardroom tasted like regret. "We burned too fast," an investor said, thumbing a spreadsheet. He looked at the man and found no theatrical bravado, only a ledger of choices. "Then we changed the burn," the man answered, not defiantly but with the patient logic of someone who had rehearsed failure and set boundaries for it. He introduced kill points, fiscal milestones that would halt the project if certain technical benchmarks weren't met. He hired craftsmen from corners of Europe who still measured by eye. He ordered tests most people called impossible. Pressure wasn't only financial. Journalists mocked prototypes that leaked oil or doors that didn't close with the expected whisper. Engineers slept on benches and argued until dawn, then rebuilt what failed. In one small, unforgettable scene, the chief engineer slammed his palm against a battered gearbox and whispered, "You will behave." It was more prayer than threat. The team learned to measure fear as a variable. Isolate the unknowns, assign them budgets, and schedule controlled experiments. Each failed run became a data point, not a headline. The turning point wasn't cinematic thunder. It was a quiet, stubborn accumulation. A gearbox that held through 10 runs, a turbine that finally cooled under load, a supplier who delivered parts that didn't need reworking. Slowly, mockery turned to curious silence. Investors stopped calling every hour and started showing up for late-night tests. The man still sweated numbers, but he'd traded panic for process. If you're feeling that same tug, fear of failing, lack of support, or no clear plan, pause and consider which variable you can turn into a controlled experiment. Like if this resonates, tell me in the comments. Which fear would you tackle first? In the next chapter, we follow the first public run that proved the skeptics wrong and changed the game forever. The night before the first full-speed run felt like standing at the edge of a cliff with everyone you loved waiting below. In the dim hangar, fluorescent lights hummed, and the car sat like a withdrawn tiger, sleek panels reflecting a tangle of tired faces and soldered hope. He moved slowly from station to station, touching a caliper here, whispering a correction into an engineer's ear there. "We have one window," he said, not as bravado but as fact. "One clean run. We make it count or we go home." Outside, rain stitched the windows with thin silver lines. Inside, monitors blinked in a language only the team understood. Temperatures, pressures, turbos spooling. A test driver climbed in with the kind of calm that had outlived panic. He glanced at the man and almost a half-smile. "If it quits fast." The man nodded. "Then we learn fast," he answered. That line was not optimism. It was a contract with discipline. Small experiments, clear thresholds, and the courage to stop and fix rather than force through. The first launch was a lesson. The engine answered with a roar that rattled loose coffee cups. Gauges climbed into red. An intake line ruptured, hot oil flung into the exhaust. For a moment the whole hangar smelled like burning brass and thin smoke curled under the hood. People froze. He heard the investor on the phone, the thin impatience in the voice he'd fought all season. The instinct was to push on, to prove them wrong overnight. He walked to the pit and made the harder call. Shut it down, take the hit, analyze. That night they worked with whiteboards, with coffee and mathematics, with the bruised pride of people who had watched dreams burn before. They traced root causes instead of hunting scapegoats. They redesigned a flange, rerouted a duct, accepted a small weight penalty for a massive reliability gain. Discipline, not stubbornness, won the day. Weeks later, under clear sky, the second run unfolded differently. The car leapt forward with the same audacity but now wrapped in control. The crowd's breath caught as times fell, then fell again. When the car returned, there was no frantic shouting. Only steady, quiet exhalations and a man who had aged in the space of an hour, smiling because his bet had become a plan that worked. What stopped you most in your own life? Fear, lack of support, or no plan? If this resonates, leave a like and stay with me. In the next part we'll take apart the exact mindset and step-by-step tactics he used to convert that near collapse into an unassailable comeback. When the dust settled and the last prototype rolled from the dyno, the story stopped being about one man's stubbornness and became a lesson in disciplined courage. You remember the ghosts. A name admired in museums but laughed at in boardrooms. Engineers burning midnight oil surrounded by blueprints and empty coffee cups. An investor's hand trembling over a check that could either resurrect a throne or bury a legacy. That tension between ruin and renaissance is where every real comeback is forged. In the workshop, under harsh fluorescent lights, a quiet conversation played out like a verdict. "This will bankrupt us?" an old partner said, eyes rimmed red from 1,000 forecasts. He was answered not with bravado but with a plan, step by measured step. Isolate the fatal risks, build fail-safe experiments, allocate capital like it was oxygen, and force a discipline on emotion. When the engine screamed for more power, they fed it with engineering rigor. When critics called the idea a folly, they answered with data and demonstration. It was not luck. It was choices made under fire. The After is not simply a car that outruns rivals. It is trust restored among craftsmen, investors, and a market that had learned to doubt. It's the look on the designer's face when the first customer drives away and the world finally hears what was always whispering in the blueprints. Possibility. You feel the weight of every sleepless night, the taste of every hard-earned victory, and the quiet, inevitable truth that legacy is rebuilt one uncompromising decision at a time. If you walk away with anything, let it be this: daring without discipline is gamble. Discipline without daring is stagnation. The resurrection needed both methodical risk-taking wedded to relentless execution. So tell me, which of those weighs heaviest on you right now? Fear of failure, lack of support, or lack of a plan? Leave a comment. Your answer helps shape the next story. If you want more measured, real-world blueprints on how brands and people come back from the edge, subscribe. There are more lessons waiting, and the next one will be just as revealing.